We will now start again. So please take a seat as we were going to start the first panel and flash insights. And also, as a reminder, the event is hybrid. So we have around 200 participants here in Warsaw, and we had for the morning session when we started around 500 persons online. We didn't see the latest numbers, but at least when the event started, that was the number we had. So today we have 3 panels approaching certification with a different vision. The first panel and flash insights. So every panel is actually introduced by flash insights. So one or more panelists are actually going to present their point of view with slides. So then it will support the discussion with the panelists themselves. So for the first topic, which is trying to tackle how certification is supporting EU legislation, we will have a flash insight, so a presentation from Johan Klickens. So he's the director of the CCB, which is, director of the Cybersecurity Certification Authority in the CCB, the Center for Cybersecurity in Belgium. So I will call Johan on stage to present his slides, and then I will call the whole panel to join after for the discussion.
So, I have the advantage or the disadvantage as Cybersecurity Certification Authority to play my role around the different EU legislations, whether it's CSA, CRA, EIDAS, artificial intelligence. We can play our role, and that gives us the advantage that we try to approach those legislations with the industry together in a feasible and pragmatic way. That's our core business. So when you look, for example, at MSSP providers, there are different legislations that play a role. You have NIS2, of course, and you have a CSA, for which we are preparing a scheme. Now, what for us is very important is that we don't duplicate the work. The work that has been done on NIS2 within each country, and as you might know, in Belgium, companies are registering and are really fully preparing NIS2 implementation. We think that the MSSP program, the MSSP certification scheme, should build upon the NIS2 requirements. Even in Belgium, in Belgium we use certification also in NIS2 for essential entities, and MSSP providers are essential entities, let us be clear. And that will allow us to work with a composite certification approach, that we don't need to redo the work that has been done in the framework of NIS2 in order to get an MSSP certificate. And I would call upon everybody involved in certification scheme development to really think about the development of schemes in this kind of way, because we are not going to reiterate and rewrite the words again. We have to bear in mind that all those companies have to read the tons of paper that we try to produce. So limit the amount of paper and make things very effective and build upon the different elements. Now, in Belgium, yes, that would be, we have a cyber fundamentals framework which we use for NIS2, but which is used beyond NIS2. Cyber Fundamentals Framework is a certification framework for organizations, which was built as an horizontal layer, transversal through all legislation for organizational aspects. So it's not only for NIS2, and therefore we can allow companies to build upon this kind of certification. Now, we're not only going to talk about MSSPs, we're also going to talk about the CRA. And a lot of the CRA manufacturers will also be NIS2 entities. A lot of the manufacturers have the size of being at least an important entity under the NIS2 directive. And also for that one, we should not duplicate the work that is being done under NIS2 and reuse this kind of work. Certainly for the high-end products, well, we have our CC approach, we have the NIS2 approach. That will not be too difficult, but I'm going to share with you the experience I have as a guest lecturer for a university in Belgium, where I asked my students to take a random IoT device and to just check it with the conformity to ETSI 303645. I have 40 students who each picked a different device. You can imagine how many devices were for the way they could test it, which is only 60 to 80% of the ETSI standard, which will conform to the CRA. 2. With all the effort we're doing on the high-end part, we should not forget that a major part of the manufacturers are on the low end. They will not take the time to read through all the documents of CC, even not at the lower van levels. Sorry, they won't do that. They haven't been doing that, and there's absolutely no reason why this situation should change. So therefore, we need to build something in between. The manufacturers we are talking to are willing to step up their game. They are willing to do that. And we might think of a voluntary scheme. Why not CSA? It's made for voluntary schemes that help those manufacturers for the basic products to comply with basic elements that comply with the CRA. And complying with the CRA means that we're not only targeting vulnerability handling, for which horizontal standards are developed, but also the aspect of secure development, risk assessment, and how to implement those elements. I think in the current approach we are having on the CRA, this is really a missing element, an element that can bridge the gap that we current manufacturers see with the current practice and what they ought to do and what they also want to do. So let's bridge that gap together, because the European Cybersecurity Certification Conference is about bringing everything together and remaining with the idea that the only adversary we have is the cyber criminal. All the rest of us are working together. This is my short flash insight of how we think that things should progress. So thanks a lot.
Sorry? Yeah. Thanks a lot, Johan. So now I will call my colleague Martin Touloun, that will be moderating the panel, as well as Nuria Cario, Angel Moreno Rubio, and Zoe Stambuliou to join on stage for this panel.
Thank you a lot, Chloe, and good morning to everybody. Let me also welcome you to Warsaw here today. It's great to see so many of you here present, interested in certification, and especially within this first topic in the interrelationship between certification and legislation, of which we have seen quite a lot being adopted in the recent years here within the EU. And this is exactly what we want to touch upon in this first panel, how certification can help the implementation of EU legislation and how we can ensure consistency between all of these different requirements. It's quite of a broad topic that we are aware of, and for that we have also gathered here an excellent panel, I think, of speakers that bring a wealth of experience and different insights within this topic. And let me allow you to briefly introduce them to you. Next to me we have Angèle Rubio here, which is a Digital Policy Manager at the TIC Council, an international trade association representing companies dealing with certification, testing, and inspection. Next to Angèle, we have Zoe, let me quickly check your last name, Stamboulia, the Director of Global Cyber and Tech Policy at MasterCard. Next to Zoe, we have Nuria Cario, which is a Technical Director at the A+ Laboratories, a division of the A+ Group, dealing with inspection and certification and testing as well of products. And Johan, I won't reintroduce you. You have already gotten your introduction, but happy to have you here today as well. And to kickstart this panel, I would like to start with you, Zoe. You come from a sector which is heavily regulated and has always been heavily regulated in the past as well. And I briefly want to have your insight of how you see the role of EU cybersecurity certification as strengthening the resilience of the maturity of the financial entities or the financial sector as a whole. And also how you see as a global organization that is MasterCard, how you manage basically all of these different regulatory and certification frameworks and ensure consistency within your own organization. So if you can briefly guide us through that, that would be great.
Thank you. I hope it works. Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot for the introduction, and also thank you, Johan, for the presentation. I think you did a great job summarizing my two key points: less paper, and we are all together in the fight against cyber criminals. I think those are extremely important points. And before I delve into the question from Martin, I will briefly want to take a step back and tell you a bit about MasterCard. Rightfully, most of you think of us as a payments company, and as you should. We are obviously a credit card company, but increasingly we also see ourselves as a technology and security company. This is not just because we are doing all the work to ensure robust cybersecurity of our infrastructure by securing our four walls, but we are also doing increasingly a lot of work to secure the ecosystem, because we understand that the digital economy cannot operate without trust, and trust is our business. And I believe that this is also true for the entire financial sector, and more resonates with the entire technology industry. So last year we processed 159 billion transactions only last year, and you cannot do that in a secure way without having the right infrastructure in place. Now, I don't need to say that to this audience, but the cost of cybercrime has increased in a way that we did not imagine potentially before, and it's expected by 2029 to reach $16 trillion. This would make it the third largest economy globally. So this is why I want to underline once again what Johan said before about cyber criminals being actually the ones that we need to ourselves come together to address and tackle. Now, that said, coming to the question of Martin, the financial sector for many years, and MasterCard specifically, we have been putting a lot of effort in ensuring the cyber resilience of our infrastructure, precisely because, and I will repeat, trust is our business, and we understood that from the very beginning, so we couldn't take any chances with our infrastructure. We also are subject to very high oversight. At MasterCard, specifically MasterCard Europe is based in Belgium. Our headquarters are in Waterloo. And we are supervised both by the ECB, considered systemically important payment system, SIPS, designated by the ECB and also the Bank of England as well. And we are working very closely with our regulators. Besides that, we are adhering to the global and ECB recognized standard of the Cyber Resilience Oversight Expectation Framework, which has been adopted with IOSCO as well, so globally recognized. So I want to underline here that a lot of work has been done in the sector for many, many years. And when it comes to EU legislation, a lot of work is being done in a horizontal manner right now. And I think we all welcome that approach and the prioritization of putting, again, top of mind cybersecurity and having a holistic approach for vulnerabilities, products, services, pretty much everything out there, including sectoral legislation like DORA. It's a very, very welcome strategy by the European Union. It is also, however, important to consider what is already there and as much as possible ensure equivalence. So when we already have frameworks in place that can already prove the cybersecurity of a specific industry or entities or services or products, it's important to make sure we don't duplicate the work and pick those existing frameworks that are adding value and reduce paperwork essentially, as Johan was saying before. And I will stop here, but I want to also add one more thing. Public-private cooperation is very, very important. We do not just ensure the cybersecurity of the financial sector and the payment sector in our case by through compliance, but we also take really active effort in working together, sharing information. We are part of the European Cyber Resilience Board of the ECB, for example. We are part of the advisory group of Europol. We work with law enforcement. We are part of FSISAC. We do a lot of work to ensure we keep each other informed and that supply chain security is not just a matter of complying with requirements, is a continuous effort and in continuous cooperation among public and private sector. And to that, we also find we take great pride in our global network. We are able to see threats that suspicious activity that starts in Brazil, so that we are able to protect and foresee that it might rapidly come to Europe and protect ourselves and work with our partners to take action. So I think those are all important points that need to be taken into consideration when developing certification. And in general, however, I do think that the effort of minimum harmonization to elevate the general cyber hygiene of the EU, it's really of utmost importance, and we couldn't welcome more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe, for sharing your insights. Also, a bit of housekeeping. There will be, after the panel, there will be the opportunity to also ask the questions to the panelists, to Zoe and the others. So if you have any pressing questions, please keep them to the end or share them already online in the chat. That being said, moving from this rather sectoral and very interesting insights, I want to give the floor to Johan, basically, to touch a bit deeper on cyber fundamentals, which is at its core a sector-agnostic certification to show NIS2 compliance on a technical level. And Johan, I want to ask you the question, which lessons learned you have already seen, whether you share the sectoral insights of Zoe, and also to delve perhaps a bit deeper on your very interesting insight that you gave just now on how you see these composite schemes growing and the interaction of cyber fundamentals, for example, with MSS or other frameworks.
Yeah. When you look at cyber criminals and how they attack companies, they're just looking for the weakest link, the holes. And apparently, currently, every company has some holes on very basic, fundamental measures. What we see is that for the attacks in Belgium, 60 to 80% can be reduced or mitigated through the use of multi-factor authentication. It's no surprise that that's a specific line in the NIS2 directive. And that's the reason why we want to build a horizontal basic layer. We know that the basic layer doesn't contain all the elements which are necessary for a specific sector. But the basic elements are the same, whether you're a manufacturing company or a hospital or anything else. And what we currently see is that the larger companies which have already started working on NIS2 implementation as from half of last year, we see that the incidents that are reported are far smaller, are more reduced, and often are mitigated before they have any effect. So I think this is, I can't give you any figures because the numbers are too small at the moment, but this is the first indication we get. And when we see still attacks coming with the new NIS2 entities, that are more the smaller ones or those which are lacking simple measures such as multi-factor authentication. So we can aim for the high stuff, and we can, what we often see in discussing with companies, the first thing they do is, well, we're going to install a SIEM and a intrusion detection system and so on, but that is not security on investment if you don't have your basics right. And starting from the basics, you can build these kind of stuff. And what we hear from the companies that assist the companies that have to protect themselves is that the assistance they can provide becomes more performant. So, in a way, a layered approach, step-by-step improvement is showing its effect. We see early effects, and I would like to come back next year with a number of figures to be able to really demonstrate this element. But the first effects we see are very promising.
Thank you very much, Johan, for these insights. And Zoe, you also mentioned it, the importance of public-private partnerships, as well as the organizations that actually have to implement this legislation or certification. And that brings me a bit to you, Angèle, as a representative of the TIC Council. How do you see the role of the TIC Council or other traders associations within the wider certification ecosystem? And how do you see also this role evolving with the recent amendment to the Cybersecurity Act allowing for service certification next to product certification?
Thank you, Martin. First of all, thank you to ENISA, the European Commission, the Polish Presidency for putting forward this conference, and of course for inviting me to this panel. I'm very happy to be back in Warsaw, special city for me, where I studied my master's degree some years ago, and I'm back as a panelist, so this special place in my heart will certainly remain. Before answering your question, perhaps let me thank the leadership of Poland and the Polish Presidency for putting cybersecurity top in the agenda, for being European leaders when it comes to cybersecurity. And here again, I think I reiterate what it has been said, public-private partnerships is essential, cooperation among all stakeholders, because really cybersecurity nowadays is not only a matter of critical infrastructure, but really any connected device. All the economy is digitized, so we really need to cooperate to ensure that the bad guys, the criminals, cannot access not only critical, but any other kind of device. So cooperation among member states, private actors is essential. So having said this, and if you allow me in the question, I will start perhaps with an introduction to the TIC sector. I know today we've gone through several acronyms, so this one I will take care of explaining what it means, and then I will delve into the role of managed security systems services. So I'm here representing TIC Council. TIC Council is the international trade association representing the testing, inspection, and certification industry. Here is the TIC acronym comes from. We are headquarters in Brussels, but we also have offices in Washington, in China, and in India. So we're truly an international industry covering a wide range of services, including conformity assessments. I will talk about this in a second, certification, inspection, and others in a wide range of sectors from infrastructure, sustainability, government services, etc., etc. And of course, we also play a key role in the digital world. And here, basically, our role is really simple, but it's really hard to deliver it in practice, is to build digital trust. And here is a bit linked with what you were saying. So your business is to build trust. Ours is also related to that. So I think this is what cybersecurity is about. It's building trust altogether among stakeholders. So coming to the TIC sector and our role on certification and broader cybersecurity legislation, I think our mission is twofold. First of all, we have a legislative, more regulatory mission function that our members, and here I'm joined by Nuria from Applus, which is a member from TIC Council, acting as notified bodies. We help manufacturers or any economic actor that falls in the scope of a regulation comply with it. And to do that, what we do is we apply standards. Maybe perhaps would be good if we can delve more on the role of standards in certification. And just to give an example on the next milestone in this cybersecurity race that we have ahead of us, as many of you might know, the Red Delegated Act will become mandatory applicable for manufacturers as of August this year. And for this, several TIC Council members already acting as notified bodies are facilitating and helping manufacturers with that produce radio equipment and want to introduce it to the EU market to comply with the regulation. And to do that, they apply the different clauses of the 18031 series standards developed by Sensenelec. And similarly, in the future, we'll play a similar role acting as notified bodies also for the Cyber Resilience Act, for example, with special importance of the product categories related to critical and important sectors where a third-party conformity assessment is mandatory due to the special characteristics of this kind of products. Having said this, and on managed security services, I think what's important, and I know, Johan, you already talked about this, but for non-technical cybersecurity experts like myself, these services basically are outsourced services and solutions that help prevent, mitigate, and respond to cyber threats. So really the importance of MSS are that they are in the first line to defend against cyber attacks. This is why they are so important for any company that hires this kind of services, being public sector, private companies, or others. So we really welcome the Commission's amendment to the Cybersecurity Act to allow in the future the development of a certification scheme for MSS. And of course, from the TIC Council and the TIC sector perspective, we can bring our knowledge, our expertise in certification of products to these MSS services. Of course, the challenges related to MSS are different. They are not a static object like an IoT product. They change over time, so perhaps we'll need to apply different evaluation and testing techniques, including the real-time monitoring and others. So our contribution can also be, in a sense, to apply existing ISO standards like the 20001 and help building an ecosystem around verification and evaluation of MSS overall. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Angel. We have covered NIS2, sectoral financial insights, MSS, and now I also want to touch a bit more on the CRA, and I want to address you, Nuria, as a member of the TIC Council. CAPs were already established under the RED Directive. And my question to you is, like, what, in your experience, which lessons have you learned from this framework or others that can be applied to the implementation of the CRA? Mm-hmm. And additionally, how do you see the interaction of the CRA and other certification requirements or frameworks in the future?
Okay. On the one hand, as a lab, we are working closely with manufacturers. And there is this common concern between all of them about navigating through different certification schemes, conformity assessments, and the fact that they need to certify the single product different times, right? This concern in terms of the RED directive, for example, and this is a proof of concept before the CRA, I think, is that a lot of the TIC industry, the manufacturers, and all the ecosystem has implemented, and I think that this is essential, has implemented some mappings in order to make this equivalence between the different certifications. And I think that this is very important because it really brings value to the fact that we can streamline the certification process. So for example, if we, in terms of requirements, if we have, as a lab, if we need to do one test, but we need to fill with, or to comply with 2 different requirements from 2 different certifications, a very important analysis is to try to make this test cover both requirements, right? So I think that all the work that has been doing by the TIC industry and for the manufacturers trying to build these mappings, it really brings value to the certification path, right? It's true that, well, there are some manufacturers that are saying, okay, I need to pay for one certification. There is a very well-recognized globally certifications. Now we have RED, or we have another certification coming up, so how can I leverage these results, right? So I think that this is one important point, and one of the lessons learned from the RED directive. And we are seeing already that there are some mappings with CRA in terms of requirements. So I think this is a lessons learned, and it's still going forward for CRA as well. Then, if I have to think in another lessons learned, is that, for example, for RED directive, we have this harmonized standard, the EN 1831. And, well, there's a challenge because at the end, this is an horizontal standard, right? And here I would like to highlight also the work of TIC Council and also from accreditation bodies, because, for example, TIC Council was organizing some meeting with some labs by doing what they call the hackathon. And basically what it is an intercomparison exercise between the labs. And this is very important. I think it really brings value to really align the certification bodies, the CAPs and the labs, in order to have the same criteria when it comes to evaluate one product, right? I would say that this is another lessons learned. And finally, well, maybe not a lessons learned, but I would say a challenge that would also be faced in the CRA is that, for example, in RED, there is some specific products that are into scope of the RED directive. I'm talking about the cybersecurity articles. And it's true that there are some manufacturers that are getting the components from other third parties that are not in the scope of the RED itself. So there is a challenge here because at the end, the integrator needs to pass a RED directive certification. But of course, there's the challenge of not having the whole knowledge of the product, because there are some other components that are coming from other third parties, and they have not been assessed against the RED requirements. In this case, from the EN 1831 standard, right? But it is surprisingly good and positive that there were still some manufacturers that are not in scope of RED that wanted still to be assessed against this RED, against these EN 1831 requirements, because at the end the final client was requesting so, and then they are somehow also streamlining this certification path. And I think it's a reflect from the industry, and that they wanted to really put effort on this certification and make the things easier, right? And lastly, well, for the RED and the CRA, I would say that there is no clear there's no clear transition from one to another. It seems that the RED is going to be amended or repealed, but I think there should be some transition or some plan B, because we have some harmonized standards coming up, and they are under construction, but I think that we need to have a plan B here and have a kind of interim plan to be able to make this transition to when the CRA comes in place and we have this horizontal standards and vertical standards ready, right? And yeah, I think these are all the lessons learned and opportunities and challenges.
Thanks a lot, Nuria. That was very insightful. I see, Johan, you had a point that you also wish to raise here, so please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to connect on that because when we look at the red, you see Article 3.3 TEF are stating some cybersecurity requirements, but they are just partial elements. I think that the red exercise is a very good pilot for a lot of the manufacturers to step up their game, but it's only an intermediate step. And I fully agree that we need to have a transition process where or we phase out the cybersecurity requirements in the red, or they need to be complemented, but they will never reach all the elements of the CRA. Therefore, I'm rather less positive about the second approach, but I still want to value the exercise that has been done by all the people involved in RED, and I think it also is an opportunity for all the labs which are involved to, and all the CAPs which are involved to step by step up their game, and that's a nice example, I think, about how we can grow cybersecurity by using experience from one subsector of digital products to a larger amount, and creating also the necessary capacity for conformity assessment within the industry. So congrats for that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the necessary capacity, it's very important what you said already, the necessary capacity, because at the end, nowadays, we don't know what is going to happen with CRA. So are we going to have these horizontal and vertical standards ready? Because if not, we really need to resize our resources, and and what we want to have is a capable team to make their job, right? But we don't know yet whether it's with the team that we have is enough, or maybe we need more. We don't want to collapse the certification, of course.
Yeah, I think it's already clear that this is just an intermediate step. Yeah. I think the CRA implementation will be another step up, and therefore I think it's a very good way to do this kind of pilot, because it allows everybody to gradually step up their game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely agree.
Thanks a lot, both, for this very interesting discussion. I see, Angèle, you also wanted to
yeah, I wanted to just mention something. First of all, I agree that we can see the Red Delegated Act as a pilot project for the CRA. However, the CRA is way wider in terms of scope and the requirements. Just to say, in the role of CAPS we play in the Red DA, we will organize in April, in 1 month time, another cybersecurity hackathon, so bringing together 7 TIC Council members, labs. We're going to test against the 18031 series, all together against the same device. In this case will be an IoT GOAT. So the idea is to see the real applicability and interoperability of the standard, and then gather the results, see how can it be improved as labs, as conformity assessment bodies. We will, of course, then produce a report with the results and the recommendations, but this will be certainly added value to the industry, to manufacturers, for us as an industry to better align on how we test this standard that for sure will also play a role, or even though it only says for the Red DA, I'm sure certain elements of the 18031 series can be used for CRA standards. So just to let you know, this will happen in April. So I will engage with all of you interested stakeholders with the results and recommendations. And then on the hackathons we did in 2024, that we did the same exercise, but testing against ETSI 303-645. So kind of the exercise you did with your students, but a different level with TIC Council members and laboratories. And next week we will publish the results and recommendations of these ETSI 303-645 hackathon, recommendations on how to improve the standard, how to make it less subjected to the interpretation of the evaluator, and try to improve certain clauses, provisions. And also we have certain recommendations for manufacturers how to apply this particular standard that, for those that might not be that aware, is widely used for IoT products in general, and I'm sure also certain elements can be reused or at least taken into account for the CRA standardization process. So that was my...
Thanks a lot, Angel, for sharing this. That being said, I wish to thank you for your initial insights in this panel, and I want to open the floor to the audience. Like, we have such a wealth of experience here within different domains. I'm pretty sure there will be some questions here in the room of our 500 participants online. So a little bit of housekeeping. Please raise your hand. The mic will go around. Please state your affiliation and the question, and to whom you are addressing the question to. So that being said, the floor is yours, and I'm also looking to the colleagues to see whether there are some questions online already.
Hello, my name is Richard Scalt. I represent TÜV Süd. I am from the Cybersecurity Office. My question is going to everyone on the panel, but also looking at Angel from the TIC Council. How do you see the influence of the current or recently announced omnibus package from the European Commission, looking specifically at the RED and now in the future also the Cyber Resilience Act implementation? Is there going to be some sort of impact that you expect? We've seen that, for example, with sustainability, where the competitiveness requirements has led to a change in thresholds. And thank you.
Should I start? Thank you, Richard. Thank you for your question. I think maybe this could be a good question for someone in DG Connect and the European Commission, but there is little known about the digital package, the omnibus for digital. I think Roberto Viola, before, he said that the Cybersecurity Act revision will happen within this digital package. That's very, very welcome. Of course, when it comes to simplification and strengthening the competitiveness of the EU ecosystem, of EU businesses from a TIC Council and the TIC sector perspective, we fully support and we want to contribute. I think simplification is needed, and in some areas, for example, I think it was mentioned before in terms of reporting vulnerabilities and incidents, I think that can be streamlined across different legislation. Perhaps maybe Johan and Zoe, you can add more on this, but I think there are certain elements that of course can be simplified and streamlined. However, as we've seen with the sustainability omnibus, what I think would be worrying for the cybersecurity ecosystem as a whole is to see perhaps an omnibus in which there are delays in the application of certain cybersecurity legislation, or there is a reduction of the scope of certain legislation. I think this is worrying because here we're talking again about the security, the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure of the IoT ecosystem. And again, we live in a digitized economy. We cannot afford for any kind of big cyber attack to happen, so we need to be prepared. And I think security requirements should not be touched. That's at least our approach. But of course, there are certain ways in which we can move forward, simplification and harmonize in certain ways. Thank you.
Well, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about the content of the omnibus and what will be exactly in there, but I will still name the elephant in the room. I hope this will be accompanied with solutions for sovereignty aspects. I will name it. You asked for it, so I respond. And I think with the MSSP development, there's a time clock which started. We can start developing the MSSP certification scheme, and Chloe and Inisa will do a great job on that. But if we don't have a transversal solution on sovereignty aspects, it will end up somewhere in the cloud, perhaps.
Thanks a lot, Johan. I see a question over there as well.
Thank you. I concur with that, by the way. My name is Peter Noordhoek. I'm from the NIS2 Quality Mark for the Supply Chain Sector, a private initiative. I'm from Gouda, where the cheese comes from. I can tell you there's no production of cheese in Gouda. It is certified everywhere, but we don't have the audit capacity to check on the whole world. And I'm saying this, of course, a bit of a joke, but we are, as another elephant, I guess, very much busy of getting enough audit capacity at the right level to certify that things are done in the way we want. And I think we have something like 50 audit organizations now together in order to do the auditing in the Netherlands alone. But much more needs to be done. And I think you're the right panel to give the solution.
And are you addressing the question to somebody specific in the panel?
Perhaps a gentleman from TIC.
So your question, if I understand correctly, is about the capacity to deliver accreditation? Well, for us, of course, as TIC Council members, we need to be accredited, being for the EUCC or to become notified bodies. And here, I think it's a call to the member states when they designate, hopefully in due time, their notifying authorities, and that they do this in a smoothly way. Of course, there are many differences between member states, but this is, of course, one of our worries in general is to get the notification, the accreditation for us, for TIC players, in time, so that then we can provide the conformity assessment services, so the certifications for manufacturers. So really, this is a call to member states to designate in time their notifying authorities, for example, for the CRA, and also deliver as fast as possible their notification and authorization in some cases for TIC companies. I would say that. I don't know if it solves your question, but
if I may compliment, in my previous life I was a former director of the Belgian accreditation body and being around for a long time. This is one of the concerns we have when we implement certification schemes, and Belgium will not implement a certification scheme when it doesn't have the capacity or doesn't contain the elements necessary to build the capacity that we need to do the conformity assessment. For example, for NIS2, Cyber Fundamental Scheme was built to build up certification capacity. The calculations were made upon during the political negotiations. We had to demonstrate with calculated elements that we had the capacity to perform the conformity assessment in Belgium with the assessors that were available. So, and I won't say that every country does this in the same way, but this is a specific point of attention for us, that we start building up on existing capacity and also entail methodologies to increase capacity over time in our country. So this is the way how we approach this.
We find that the numbers for the NIS2 organizations are far fewer than if you have to deal with 120,000 SMEs or more for one country alone. So if we really are intent on not just having the large organizations, though they have the most risk, but if we really want to have the business society, the healthcare sector at the right level, we are talking about different numbers. And did you do that too?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, Because that's the challenge, I think, in many countries, to have enough of the professional capacity and the empathy with the sectors to run the schemes in the proper way.
But this is also part of the story I told you about the CRA. This is why we need basic certification schemes for basic elements which are voluntary, because not only will they help the manufacturers to step up their game, but they will also create an input for assessors and conformity assessment practitioners to step up their game and to allow them to learn.
Yes.
Because an ISO 27001 auditor compliant to ISO 27006, that's a capacity that a conformity assessment body cannot build themselves. That's an investment which is too large. I fully agree on that. And that's why we need other methodologies for that.
True. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. It's a very interesting discussion. And to include our online audience as well, I quickly want to move to the colleagues from that are monitoring the online panel, whether or not there are some questions from our online audience already. But go ahead in the meanwhile, Philippe.
So, a question to Zoe and then to Nuria. Zoe, the activities that we are doing on certification, I guess, as a MasterCard, you use banking cards that are certified, fine, or you rely on certification for high-end products, but do you get the same approach for a broader scope of solutions, using certification or intending to use certification as a broader way to select among the various offers which ones reach a certain certification security level? And a question to Nuria, based on the facts that were given by Johan, that only two products reached after a couple of bad treatments from his students some level of security. It's not only about putting in processes in place to assess, is also helping industry to reach a bit of a level of expectation. So what is the right amount of not consulting, because consulting is bad. It's disgusting when you are accredited. What support can an accredited CAB provide, or where do the vendors get the right amount of information to be trained, to be educated, to reach? So two questions. One more on the use of certification as a way to select solutions, and one as how to help around people that have no education yet on the topic.
Thanks a lot, Philippe. Let's start with you, Zoe, on the first point of Philippe, and then we'll move to Nuria as well.
Yeah, I have to say I'm not fully sure I understand fully the question, so I will try to answer to my best of my ability, but we can continue the discussion later as well. So in terms of how we use external, I'm assuming it's about the way we manage our third-party risk management, right? So essentially, yes, indeed, there are certifications out there that can be considered in terms of obviously credibility and allowing us to make selections. We also encourage very much the use of NIST. We work together with our third parties to use harmonized standards. But also, we don't just rely on that. Yes, certification is a piece of it, but I want to also make the point earlier on that cybersecurity, as you know better than I do, is not just a point in time. So you are certified, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we only rely on that. It's a continuous process of monitoring and staying aware of the threats out there and creating that channel of communication with your third parties. We as MasterCard, obviously, we cooperate a lot with SMEs globally. We are able to, as we usually say, it might sound a cliche, but think globally but act locally. And this is why, because we leverage the global network, but also at the same time, we monitor if the pizzeria in Sicily has a problem with a transaction, right? So we are very much working with in our supply chain to make sure also they are following the standards. I do want to highlight, though, that in terms of capacity building, and to Johan's point, it's not. There is an element that is very much about compliance and oversight, and to the gentleman's point about you cannot have. You can create capacity in terms of auditing and oversight, but there probably won't be enough people in the world to continue audit and doing oversight, right? So it's also important to focus a bit on that, think a bit out of the box in the sense of look how, at least the lessons learned from the financial sector is how public-private partnership works in the sense of creating those communication channels. When you do an exercise, for example, when you do an exercise among sectors, energy sector and financial sector and telecommunications, you are not going to just have the benefit of ticking a box of I did an exercise so that you say that, yeah, if you do an audit, I can show you that I'm exercising. But it's also the matter of that, what our chief security officer often says is that if I have an issue, I know I have a number who to call. And I know that there is certain trust there in terms of I'm going to take rapid action because I already know the people that are involved. So the human element is very important. So capacity building is not just about compliance and certification, which are extremely, extremely important. But we also need to start building muscle in operational resilience that is beyond that. And the other element is the situational awareness that comes with it, so threat intelligence and monitoring constantly our network, all of these things are very important. So this power of convening that ENISA and the Polish Presidency and the Commission have by bringing people here together to build those channels between people is extremely, extremely important, because this is when we share also things about the latest threats and the latest trends that we see. And this is how we educate also SMEs, the weakest parts of our digital economy. So yes, certification is extremely important when it comes to third-party risk management and harmonized standards and harmonized regulations as well. But kind of going there and talking to people and bringing the CISO community together and everyone that defines policies and doing a threat-based also policy making, those are also very important elements to ensure. We take an approach that is very much holistic, securing the ecosystem as a whole, and it's not collective defense. It's not just about compliance and about certification. It's also about having a harmonized way of looking at things, but also really going down there and connecting people and keeping each other abreast of the latest threats. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Zoe, and to you, Nuria, for the second point of Philippe's question.
Yeah, for the second question, what I could say, I'm not going to talk about consultancy. Now we have a clear view of what is consultancy. So I think that the tools that are not consultancy or are not defined as consultancy can be used by the labs in order to give this support to the manufacturers. So on the one hand, we can train to the manufacturers, of course, not from a solution point of view, but on a general training and what it is expected on an evaluation process and what is expected in terms of requirements, right? So I think that this is very important. And another second point that I would highlight is that there are some manufacturers that maybe they have the product already designed, and it is already too late to pass an evaluation, right? Because, as we said, it is security by design. So it's very difficult to come back to this design stage and redefine things. So what we are giving the message to the community that engage with your lab or with a consultant or whatever, but in the first stage of the development. And I think this is really important. From the lab perspective, we can still do this gap analysis, so we can still provide this service, and then the manufacturer can have a clear view on what is the stage or what is the level of the product in terms of assurance or in terms of compliance of the requirements. So I think we have tools as a lab, even though we cannot provide these solutions, but I think it's important from the point of view of the development that everyone starts from the beginning and integrating this security from the beginning, not at the end of the product development.
Thanks a lot, Nuria. I know we're a bit ahead of time, but I also don't want to keep you too long from your lunch break. So I'm going to ask the colleagues to take one or two questions from our online audience. So go ahead, Ksenia.
So can you hear me? Perfect. Thank you, Martin. So indeed, we have received quite some questions on the chat, and thank you very much for your active participation to the online participants. So maybe we can just take a couple of these questions just right afterwards. First question, it's addressed to Johan. How do you believe NIS2 could compete standards such as NIST, ISO 27001, and MITRE? Maybe you want me to mention.
Please, we'll take the questions. Let's take two or three, and then we can address them in series.
Okay, great. So another question: will cybersecurity standards for industrial facilities be harmonized following CRA? For example, IEC 62843 for industrial equipment and IEC 62859 for nuclear power plants. Are common criteria standards applicable to nuclear power plant type facilities? And maybe I can pick up a last one, because there are several questions in the chat. Will an EUCC certificate be recognized outside Europe by CC member states, mutual recognition agreement? I think this is enough for now, and if we have more time, we can continue.
I think so as well. And the second question was already very specific. I'm looking here whether anybody has experience with nuclear standards. I doubt it. So let me first address the question to Johan, and then we'll touch upon the other question that was raised.
A very nice fact is that nuclear sector is out of scope of NIS2. On the first question, well, this is the reason why we built Cyber Fundamentals. Cyber Fundamentals is built on NIST TSF, the IEC standards on OT, ISO 27001, and the SIS controls. We built that framework, and we used the MITRE ATT&CK framework to validate the scheme against successful attacks in not only in Belgium, but also in the other countries which have joined us and which are joining us in the future, because we want a scheme to be realistic and to be able to cope with the attacks that are currently happening. So on the one hand, we base it on standards. On the other hand, we use the MITRE ATT&CK framework to determine the kill chain and to determine whether the measures which are included in the framework are still effective against the kill chains of the attacks that we see in practice. And I think that is one of the advantages that cybersecurity centers have by collecting all these data and making this data work for the companies that use the certification schemes.
Thanks a lot, Johan. I don't know if anybody else of the panel wishes to further comment on this. Not specifically.
On all the questions? Or?
Go ahead.
Yeah, on the one on nuclear standards, of course I'm not an expert on this, but if I think the question was if they will be harmonized to facilitate compliance with CRA. The decision if a standard is harmonized, it's a decision of the European Commission. So maybe they can ask this directly to the European Commission, but I'm not an expert in nuclear stuff. Then if EUCC will be recognized by other third countries and will have mutual recognition agreements, well, I mean, I think that would be ideal. If it will happen, I don't know. What I know is that currently the Commission is signing and in the process of different EU digital partnerships with Singapore, with others in Asia. I don't know if within the scope of these partnerships and agreements there can be the possibility, or there are talks about mutual recognition agreements. Of course, from a TIC perspective, we welcome, and at the end, cybersecurity is a global threat. It's common to everyone. So if the more MRAs we have, the better will be at the end for the overall international cybersecurity. So we really welcome this. If it will happen or not at the end, I think is a matter of politics and the European Commission together with our countries to negotiate this. So this will be my take in these two questions.
Thanks a lot, and I see Johan, you also want to fit in there.
Well, I get signs from the public, and I think due to a lot of work of people who are sitting in front of us, we have the mutual recognition in the with the CCRA. So I think it's a positive point for all the community that is using common criteria, and hopefully it will make the penetration of EUCC for high-end products even better.
I think on that positive note, it's good to end this panel and to give you also the opportunity to further discuss during lunch break with the participants or with each other. And as we normally do, we will also react in writing to some of the outstanding questions that we still have of the online participants. So thanks a lot to my panel, to the excellent panelists, and thanks a lot for your dynamic participation in this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the great panel. And just on the last question, the next panel will actually go deeply on the topic. So that will be after lunch with a flash insight from Rob. So we will take a bit of a longer lunch break, and we'll come back to start the next panel at 1:40. So you have more time to eat and talk. Thanks a lot. Je sais pas.